Good morning, students. Now we have come to the next part of this chapter, that is the sexual reproduction, and now we are going to discuss about the process of sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Process of sexual reproduction in flowering plants involves two stages. First stage is called the pollination, second stage is called the fertilization. So both the stages together, it helps in fusion of male and female gametes, so the young ones also will be produced, or female gamete will be fertilized by the male gamete and the embryo will be developing. Now what is the significance? First one we will be discussing about the pollination. What do you mean by pollination? Now pollination is nothing but the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of a flower is called the pollination. Now next part we are going to discuss about the significance of pollination. Now what is the importance? That is called importance of pollination. Due to pollination only fertilization will be taking place, which will be developing the fruit. Formation of fruit and seeds take place. Now next one, new varieties of plants are produced due to are formed through new combination of genes between the gametes, and in cross pollination only it is possible. So new varieties of plants are formed through new combination of genes in case of cross pollination. So these are the two significance. We will come cross pollination, self pollination will come afterwards. Now pollination is of two types. There are two types of pollination: self pollination and the cross pollination. Self pollination, it is also called the autogamy. What do we mean by that? Now when the pollination takes place, or the transfer of pollen grains take place from the anther to the stigma of a flower that are located in the same plant, or maybe in the same flower, or the flowers that are located in same plant is called the self-pollination. So what is that? The self-pollination is also known as autogamy. The transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of the flower or another flower that are located in the same plant is called the self-pollination. Today in the class B section I have discussed also what do you mean by self-pollination with diagram, and when I will be taking the class for A section and C section, again I will be explaining with diagram. Now example is hibiscus. Now next one, advantages of self-pollination. What are the advantages? Now self-pollination takes place between self-pollination takes place in one flower, or maybe the flowers that are located in same plant. So what is happening? Self-pollination is sure in bisexual flowers. What do you mean by that? Bisexual flower means a flower which is having both the reproductive organs. Male reproductive organ, that is androecium, and female reproductive organ, gynoecium, both are present. In that case, need not transfer. So from the anther to the stigma, the transfer of pollen grain will be taking place. So sheer self-pollination is possible in bisexual flowers. Number 2, flowers need not depend on agents. Flowers need not depend on agents for pollination, for transferring the pollen grains from anther to stigma. Number 3, there is no wastage of pollen grain will be taking place, because in the same flower pollination will be taking place, or in the same plants between the flowers pollination will be taking place. So there will be no wastage of pollen grains. So these are the advantages can be seen. What are the disadvantages? The disadvantages are very few. What are they? The seeds are less in number. Self-pollination, whatever seeds will be produced, pollination, fertilization and seeds will be produced, that will be less in number. Number 2, the endosperm, which is considered the reserve food material for the growth of the embryo, that will be very minute, very small amount of reserve food material will be there in self-pollinated plants, in self-pollinated fruit. Now third one, no new varieties will be produced, because pollination is taking place between the genes of the same plant. Within the same plant pollination is taking place, so same type of characteristic feature will be developing. No new varieties will be developing due to self-pollination. So these are the what to be studied in a definition. What do you mean by self-pollination? There are advantages, disadvantages. Number 2, second type of pollination is called the cross-pollination. What do you mean by cross-pollination? Now here also the transfer of pollen grain will be taking place, but transfer of pollen grain takes place from one flower of one plant to the different flower that are located in different plant, but plants are same species. That is called the cross pollination. So how we have to explain? The transfer of pollen grain from anthers to the anthers of a flower to the stigma of the another flower that are located in different plant of the same species. Flower on another plant of the same species. That is called the cross pollination. Again, I am saying that I will be explaining when I will be taking the class for A section and C section. B section, D section already had been discussed on board with diagram. Now next, advantages of cross pollination. The seeds produced as a result of cross pollination will be showing new characteristic feature. Develop, germinate properly and grow into better plants. That means cross pollination leads to the production of new varieties, because two different plants are responsible for the pollination. So mixing of characters will be taking, mixing one plant another plant. So transfer of pollen grain will be taking place from this flower to the another flower that are located on the another plant of the same species. Suppose here this is hibiscus plant, this is another hibiscus plant. So flower of one hibiscus plant pollen grain will be transferred to the another flower of the hibiscus plant. So same type of plants but different. Same species but different plant. Different plant in the sense, hibiscus, there are two different plants are there when the pollination will be taking place. It is called the cross pollination. So mixing of characters are taking place. So new varieties will be developing due to cross pollination. Number 2, more viable seeds are produced. What do you mean by viable seeds? The seeds which are able to germinate and grow the new plants. Those are called the viable seeds. More viable seeds will be produced. So these are the two advantages. Disadvantages are also there. Pollination may fail due to distance barrier. I told two plants that may be located in nearby, or if it is distance, in that case pollination will be a risk factor. May fail also. More wastage of pollen grain, because pollen grain has to be transferred. So wastage of pollen grains will be taking place. Third one, it may introduce some unwanted characters. Sometimes it may appear unwanted characters, not good characters. And fourth one is called the flowers depend on agents to carry the pollen grains. If the agents are not there, suppose wind is a type of agent. If wind is not blowing properly, transfer of pollen grains will be not taking place. So wind is the agent which may not blow at that time to the direction of the another flower. In that case, pollination will be not taking place, fertilization also will be not possible. So these are the disadvantages are there in cross pollination. But in self pollination, there is no such type of problem is there. So these are the disadvantages. Flowers depend on the external agencies for pollination. Now next part. This is book back 5 marks question. Both self pollination advantages, disadvantages, cross pollination definition with advantages, disadvantages. Now we are going to discuss about the different types of agents that are responsible for pollination, which is called the pollinating agents. Agents for cross pollination. And for cross pollination only agents are needed, because flowers are located in different plants. That's why transfer of pollen grain is needed. How it will be transferred? With the help of agents. What are the agents may be? Agents may be wind, may be water, may be animals. So in order to bring about cross pollination, it is necessary that the pollen should be carried from one flower to the another of a different plant. This takes place through the help of the agents such as maybe animals, maybe insects, maybe wind, maybe water. So accordingly different terms are used. First is called pollination by wind. Pollination of wind is called anemophily. Underline there. When the pollination with the help of wind is called the anemophily. So the anemophilous flowers will be having some characteristic features so that wind can take or transfer these pollen grains from one plant to the another plant. Anemophilous flowers produce enormous amount of pollen grains. The reason behind that what? That at the time of transfer wastage may take place. So for successful pollination, so many pollen grains are also produced by these anemophilous flowers. Pollen grains, what are the characteristic feature? Underline there, point wise you mark. The pollen grains are small, smooth, dry and lightweight. First one. Second characteristic feature, pollens of such plants are blown off at a distance of more than 1000 kilometers. Third one, the stigmas are comparatively large, protruding. It will come out from the flower so that it can easily catch the pollen grains, protruding and sometimes hairy to trap or to catch the pollen grains. Example, grasses and some cactus. Pluriforma cactus is cacti. Now next one, pollination by insects. So these are the characteristic features of anemophilous flowers. Now next one, pollination by insects. Pollination with the help of insects like honeybees, flies are called the entomophilous, entomophily. To attract the insects, these flowers have developed certain characteristic features. Flowers are brightly colored so that insects from far away they can see the flower and they will be moving towards it. Brightly colored, have smell and nectar. So insects are visiting the flower for not for pollination, for getting the food, nectar. So by chance plants also will be benefited by transferring the pollen grain. So the flowers will be brightly colored and have smell and nectar, sweet smell and nectar. Number 2, the pollen grains are larger in size. Exine is peated and or spiny also. So they can be adhered, they can be stick to the firmly on the sticky stigma. 80% of the pollen grains pollination done by the insects such as honeybees. Next one, pollination by water. The pollination with the help of water is called hydrophily. Hydro means water. Hydrophily. Phily means liking. Water liking plants. Water is responsible for the pollination process is called the hydrophily. This takes place in aquatic plants. What are the characteristic features? The pollen grains are produced in large numbers. Number 2, pollen grains float on the surface of water till they land on the stigma of the female flowers. Example, Vallisneria, the typical example. Hydrilla also is the aquatic plant. And the fourth type, it is called the zoophily. Zoophily, pollination by animals. When pollination takes place with the help of animals, it is called the zoophily. So what type of pollen grains will be produced by the flowers? The flowers of such plants attract animals by their bright color, size, scent, etc. Such an example, sunbird pollinates flower of canna, gladioli, etc. Squirrels also pollinate flowers of cotton silk tree. So anyway, one thing you have to keep in your memory, that what do you mean by, what is the term is used when the pollination takes place by animals? The term is used called the zoophily. Few examples have been given, and the pollen grains to be adapted to pollinate by the animals. So flowers of such plants attract animals by their bright colored, then size and sweet smell, scent. Example has been given, sunbird plants pollinate flowers of sunbird, the name of that bird is a type of animal only, pollinates flowers of canna, gladioli, and squirrels pollinate the silk cotton tree, flowers of silk cotton tree. Till here, okay, thank you children.